Hey there, Cynthia here, and welcome back to my Quilt Lab. This is the final video for this amazing block of the month from Northcott's Banyan Batiks, designed by Frog Hollow Designs. Before you get started, please have all your blocks labeled, pressed, and squared. You'll also need to head over to Northcott's website to get the errata page for this block of the month, as there's a few additions and some changes that you're going to need that you can't see in the instruction booklet. But fear not, I have a link in the description, and I've done my best to label the slides, so please feel free to pause and make notes as we go. Let's jump in and finish the quilt top. The last few pages of the instruction booklet are simply pictures showing how to piece the quilt, first in larger sections and then into halves and finally into the top. Here's section 1. This will be the top of the quilt. I pressed each of these seams open to keep them as flat as possible. One thing worth pointing out is those squares and the square blocks should match up with the middle of the pinwheel blocks, so that's a good place to place a pin. On to section 2. You may notice that there's a coloring difference in the 6A and 6B blocks, which I believe I addressed back in the month 6 video. Basically, I wanted to match what you see in the picture. So head back to that month 6 if you have any doubts or concerns, or just don't worry about it. I have a few changes, both by mistake and design, and it will just make my quilt all that much more special and unique. So don't sweat the small stuff. No quilt police here. Piece this section in columns first, then join the columns to make the final layout. Section 3. Pretty similar to the first section. Take a close look at your orientation of that block 8B. Notice the lighter patch of the 4 square fabric is on top. Piece, press, and move to section 4. There's our recently finished block 12, along with some 9 patches and the Lemoyne stars. You're going to piece together the 3 blocks on top first, then the 2 blocks to the right of block 12. This makes 3 bigger blocks. Then create rows, and finally attach the 2 rows to one finished section. Section 5. Another big section. Please let me point out that my block 11 has a slightly different fabric choice. I explained why I did this back in the month 11 video. Don't let it confuse you if yours looks a little different. That's perfectly fine. Also take note of the orientation of block 8C, so it's facing the correct direction. You're going to piece together in columns first, and then combine to make the long section. And here's a quick close-up between the first 2 columns. I just wanted to show how you can use the middle of each block to help piece together the blocks. I usually throw a pin in at the middle first to ensure that the piecing is as accurate as I can make it. Here's the finished section. On to section 6. Okay, once again we're going to piece into smaller sections first. The first row, then the second, and piece together block 3F and 3C before you attach it to block 11. Then piece the rows together to create the final section. Okay, section 7. Again, watch your orientation of the 4-patch block here. Piece those 2 together, and then the 3E 2A combo. And bonus points if you see my mistake, which is now officially a design choice. Then you can add these to either side of block 9 to finish up section 7. Section 8. Pretty similar to what we did back in section 6. Piece your 2 flying geese blocks together, piece the 2 lower rows, then you can add the flying geese to block 10 and before combining the now 3 rows into a final section layout. Alright, all the bigger sections are now done. Going forward, I'll be referring to the sections now instead of the individual blocks. Grab your sections 5, 6, 7, and 8 and lay them out like this. You'll piece sections 6, 7, and 8 together first, making a massive row, then add section 5 above it. This is the bottom half of the quilt center. Now let's move to the top. Grab sections 1 through 4. Lay out this with section 1 across the top. Section 2 is above Section 3, which are both to the left of Section 4. You'll first piece Section 2 and 3 together. Remember to use those block centers as references when you go to pin. Then add Section 4 to the right and top it with Section 1. And that's the top half of the quilt. Let's put those two halves together. Now I pinned at every 6-inch finished block at least to make sure that the points meet up accurately. This may mean you'll need to ease in some fabric if your blocks aren't perfectly 6-inch finished squares. I know mine were not. I blame those pesky Lemoyne stars, but just work at it. You'll do it. So here's the finished center. Give yourself a high five. Take a quick break. That was a lot of work. Okay, break time over. Let's talk about those borders. This quilt has 2 borders. And in my mind, it's important to make sure this first border, the one that isn't pieced, creates an absolutely square top. Borders have the potential to create waviness if your quilt top isn't square. If this is a foreign concept to you, please Google how to add borders because there's a couple of methods out there to achieve this. And here's my simplified version. You'll see that I have a tape measure next to the right side of this quilt. Every time I want to add a border, I check for squareness by measuring each side and the middle. I measure here, here, and here. I then average the 3 lengths, and that's what I'm going to cut my border strips to, which often means I have to ease in or stretch the fabric quilt top in order to make it fit. This also double checks my quilt top size because often it's not the size the pattern says it should be. And here, for instance, my border side strips are cut to almost a 1/2 inch bigger, proof that nothing's perfect, but I'm making it perfect. The first border will need to be pieced, and while the instructions don't say how to do this, I mitered my seams and then cut to the desired length. Add these borders to the sides and then repeat that entire process of measuring to make the top and bottom border. Okay, time for that second border. Remember, there's 2 color variations of the flying geese in this border, so place accordingly. You're going to need additional border fabric attached to the ends of the flying geese strip sets. Here's the side borders attached. First, I added the extra length to that flying geese set. Then I measured for adding borders, just like I did the first border around. And hopefully you'll get the same number in all 3 spots, since you've already squared up the quilt with that first border. I cut the second border to that length and attached the sides. I'll note that for both of these borders, I pressed towards that first border because it made for a flatter top and was easier since I didn't have to wrestle folding those bulky seams. The top and the bottom border have an additional piece to add. Here's a close-up of the 3 pieces before I cut anything down. The 6.5 unfinished square is the cornerstone, and I'll add the extra length to the other end of the flying geese strip. I measured for the border and then cut off the extra before attaching the last 2 borders. And there you go! Another quilt top done! Great job! And as the instruction booklet says, quilt and bind as desired. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on this block of the month. I've had a wonderful time, and I'm glad you've been along for the ride too. I have 2 more previous year block of the months back in my channel, so go and check out those playlists. Please give me a big old thumbs up if you enjoyed what I had to offer this time. And I hope I'll see you next year too, as I have another block of the month on the horizon. As always, please like, subscribe, share with your friends, tell all your family, and check out the description for my favorite sewing tools that I use during this block of the month. And as always, keep quilting. Bye-bye now.